Welcome to the Retirement Resource Show, the place to come and live a retirement that is meaningful, fulfilling, and fun. We believe this phase of your life is the best time of your life. It's up to you. And we've got the show to get you there. Here's your host, Bo Henderson.
Welcome. It's that time for the Retirement Resource Show, where we're not just going to talk about, do you have enough money in your 401k? That's important to be able to retire. We're not going to talk about the Roth IRA rules only. We'll talk about that if it's a question we have, but we're going to talk about navigating and living a retirement that is meaningful, fulfilling, and the people that stick with us, they want a retirement that's fun. So welcome to the Retirement Resource. I'm here with Amy Scruggs. How's it going, Amy?
It is so great to be here, boy. We're going to have some fun today. I had a chance to talk with our guest a little bit offline, and I am just so excited about her, and we will be introducing her very shortly. But Bo, I always love to kick this off that we discuss maybe some hot topics taking place, things that we can just bring some good information. And today, our hot topic leads into really what we're going to be speaking about with our guest. And I want to talk about this Great Resignation. Seems to be such a big thing that's been out there as people are leaving the workplace. And this does affect retirees, but just from a larger perspective, what do you feel about this Great Resignation and how it's actually affecting the economy and businesses today?
You know, I'm seeing a lot of the leaving the workforce, some by choice, some not so much by choice. You know, over the last 2 years with what we've been dealing with the pandemic, a lot of layoffs, a lot of pension buyouts and layoffs, forcing people out early. And what happens sometimes is it can change a plan of, hey, I want to retire my plan is to retire in 2, 3, 4, 5 years to, wow, I no longer have this job. Now what do I do? Another thing that I've seen happen, Amy, is a lot of people were able to work from home during COVID. And then now that things are opening back up, and their employer is saying, okay, let's get back to business as normal. They're saying, I'm not going to commute. Sorry. Either you let me work from home because we saw that was viable, or I'm going to go ahead and retire now. So some of it's by choice. Some of it's not. The numbers are big. I was looking at a job openings and labor turnover survey that was released by the U.S. Department of Labor. And I'm looking at some of the statistics. More than 4.3 million workers quit their jobs in February of this year. Wow. Followed by 4.5 million in November. That's 9 million workers. And of what we're calling this Great Resignation of people leaving the workforce, there was more than, most of them are older than 55 years old, over half. So over half are in this, we're approaching or are probably within a 10-year window of retiring. So it's a little bit different demographic and shift. And when we dig in a little bit and look for what are some of the reasons, we talked about a couple that I've seen firsthand. Right? I don't want to commute. I don't want to go back to the office because it was not necessary for me to drive to downtown Atlanta an hour both ways to do my job when I saw I could do it effectively from work. Other motivators we saw 63% of respondents were dissatisfied with their pay. Hey, you know, if they're not, another 63% felt like they had limited opportunities for advancement.
Right.
Over half, 57%. How about this one? This one's a little different, right? Lack of not feeling respected at work, right? Feeling like the money might be, and this is something that could be a whole nother conversation. We could even ask our guest a question like this. The money could be right. It could be a situation, but if I don't feel respected and enjoy going to work and there's some emotional turmoil there, maybe it's not worth it. And so we said, well, okay, what happened with all this respondents and everything coming back in the survey of why people were leaving the workforce? Over half, again, 57% completely switched careers and jobs to find something that promised more satisfying or fulfilling in the long run. What does that sound like? Right? It's almost like an employment for rich life. It's like, hey, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do something I enjoy. And I do see that shift too, as people get closer to retirement. A lot of times what we realize is, you know what? I was making the income of this. For me to transition into retirement from income gap perspective, I need to maybe bring home half of that. I have a lot more options to bring home half of that. And maybe I should do something with less stress, less responsibility. And lo and behold, what if I could do something I actually enjoyed? So I think it's fascinating, and I
It
think it's
is
a fascinating
fascinating.
topic.
Do you see people worried about the economy with this being such a huge flux taking
Mhm.
place?
Yeah, that's another side of it right now. I've been having conversations coming in, people concerned about their plan to retire next year, 2 years out, because of the volatility in the market today. Saying, well, my plan was next year, but with the losses I'm seeing in the market, I'm not comfortable or feel secure to
Right.
do that. So you're seeing some of that too. People actually planning on the opposite, maybe working longer because the volatility we're experiencing. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating to me
Yes.
because this demographic that's within 10 years of a traditional retirement, a lot of times you leave the workforce, it's not easy to get back in, or at least back in at the level you left.
Mhm.
So it's surprising to see this demographic so fluid and shifting and being willing to leave their career.
It's really something to see happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things is as this continues to happen is we need to get better at modeling, helping people get very specific of what we talked about. Okay, you don't need to be bringing home $6,000. Let's see if you brought home three, you could make this transition.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have the clarity to look at my options. And speaking of being creative, being open to new ideas, and getting away from the traditional career, traditional retirement, I think we explore, we do experiments, we test things, and we be open to new ideas. And that's why I'm excited about our guest Leslie today. So why don't you
It's,
introduce Leslie? I think
oh,
she's going to fly right into this topic.
we have an incredible guest here, Bo, and she's got solutions for this, and she's going to share that with us. I can't wait to hear the conversation that you are both about to have, but I want to tee her up properly. So for everyone watching this, Leslie Kuban, she is phenomenal, and you are in for a treat. After a rewarding chapter with mailboxes, etc., which is now the UPS store, Leslie and her father launched a franchise consulting business in 1999. They are well versed in growing a family business during strong economic times and in a recession. They have proudly helped over 500 individuals and families choose the best franchise brand for their needs and goals. Leslie also hosts an original weekly series. She is a fellow TV host of ours. She hosts the Atlanta Franchise Today on the Atlanta Small Business Network. I'm going to put that link for everybody to see while we're doing the interview. But with no further ado, we are excited to introduce Leslie. Welcome.
Hello. Good afternoon. Great to see you guys.
Hey, Leslie, welcome to the show. Have you seen, I know, in helping people find the right fit and explore franchises, I want people to be clear on what you do and how you help people. But have you seen some of that data or either firsthand or just that statistics that I was talking about people leaving for various reasons and kind of a different demographic than we've seen in the past?
It's interesting. So when COVID joined the party a couple of years ago in March of 2020, the world stopped still, including my business for about 2 months. We're all scared. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going on. But then come May, I've been busier than I've ever been in my almost 20 years in my consulting business now. The last two and a half have been as busy as I've ever seen because like you mentioned, people are at home. They have more time to reflect because they're not commuting back and forth to downtown Atlanta or downtown Chicago or downtown Dallas any longer. And it's allowed some space to consider, well, what really makes me happy? What do I really need? What do I really want? So I think people who may have just been nose to the grindstone and never thought about owning their own business, never thought about franchising as a way of owning their own business, kind of have opened people's eyes to exploring new types of possibilities, franchising being one of them.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit because it's a little different mindset. We talked about the statistics of people leaving the workforce, people changing careers, but let's talk about that. What if we leave the workforce and start a business? What would be some benefits? Because we're talking specifically, a lot of the data I was referring to was people 55 and older. So is that too late to start a business? I mean, running a business isn't easy. I'll tell you that firsthand. What do you see there?
It's interesting. So for many years, the poster child of who is that right candidate to own a franchise was between the age of about 40 and 55. Okay. So in that time window there, because if you think about it, we're old enough to have gained some wisdom and experience and business skills under our belt. but we still have enough gas in the tank before we're really ready to hang up our cleats. So that age range that you mentioned is very much in the sweet spot of who you see entering business ownership through franchising for the first time. I will say the fringes, though, are starting to grow. I'm seeing older clientele, people who are maybe tried retirement for a little while, and they realize that that gets old very quickly when you don't have something meaningful and purposeful and relationships that you're able to invest in, and something that you're growing and getting a lot of enjoyment out of. So I'm seeing the older clientele, people late 50s, early 60s, coming in and starting to explore franchise ownership. I'm seeing it on the younger end too. I think a lot of folks have seen maybe their parents go through a lot of career transitions and career instability, and they want more control for themselves. So even some of the younger generations are exploring business ownership through franchising too.
Well, and we talk about this idea of retirement, and I love this group. What you'll find about this group that's watching, Leslie, is they're not that definition that you see in the magazine of retirees that are kind of winding it down. They're ramping it up. All right. And I think of this group and I get excited because of how much I learn in the conversations. They bring decades of experience to the table, leadership, management, all kinds of skill sets. And what I love when we're having that conversation about maybe being open to thinking outside the box. And remember, I was saying that piece about, well, maybe I can leave this career, because typically towards the end of somebody's career, what I find is they have a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress, and they're starting to see retirement in the future. So if somebody's like, hey, I'm ready for a change, but I'm not ready to stop working, I don't know what I would do with myself. I see a lot of people that have worked 30 or 40 years and they like to work. They just don't necessarily like doing what they're doing anymore. So how could you take somebody that has all these skills and maybe they kind of do an experimental retirement, or maybe a retirement phase one, and help match them up with something that either they're a right fit for, or that's a right fit for them, or maybe it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, and when we look at the world of franchise opportunities, I'd say at least half of the folks that I'm working with, we're taking a kind of a bridge strategy approach. They're thinking about retiring from their corporate career. They want to make that change, but they're not ready to do it quite yet. They're going through the planning process. And what's nice about many franchise systems is because they're so refined and detailed, that it allows someone to get a business started before they jump ship from their current business or corporate career. So we see a lot of people taking that approach, and it can be in a lot of different industries. I have folks exploring opportunities in the fitness industry that are modeled in this kind of semi-active owner type of strategy. There's numerous franchise brands in the pet care industry that allow people to be that semi-active owner. Healthcare. I'm working with folks looking closely at a 21st century laundromat, coin laundry type of business that is very much that semi-active model that allows people to plan for their transition from their demanding, stressful, full-time corporate career into a business environment that they have more control over. And I'd say that's one of the drivers that I hear most commonly. You were speaking earlier about motivations that people have, whether it's they don't want to commute anymore, they don't enjoy what they're doing. One that I hear a lot is, I don't have control over the longevity of my work life. Corporate America is going to tell me when it's time for me to retire. And I don't want to have someone making that decision for me. I'd like to make that myself. So by owning a business, it allows someone to have more say-so over the longevity of the career, their participation level in their business. So it allows people in that kind of stepping stone strategy to work their way into being an entrepreneur after their corporate career.
Now, I think there's something empowering too about having your choices, you controlling your timeline. Right? I think that one of the things we talked about in a lot of our conversations, for those of you watching, Leslie and I started talking around work I do with the Retirement Coaches Association, which is having conversations outside of just the traditional financial aspects of retirement or the spreadsheet, so to speak. And one of the things we ran into as we dig in and do research is a lot of things happen when you leave the workforce, you gain some things. You gain, and when we ask people, what do you feel like you're going to gain? Time freedom's a big one, right? You might gain the ability to travel now and do a lot of things you never were able to do a hobby, volunteer. So you gain some things, but the part that's not talked about enough is you also lose some things when you transition from an employer. And we started digging into that. We realized people, in a lot of cases, the retirement transition could be negative, meaning it not be a successful retirement. Even if the money's right, if you're not happy, it's not a successful retirement. When we leave an employer, we lose relationships. A lot of people that have worked somewhere for a decade, their most important relationships are tied up at that work. A lot of people's sense of contribution just in life and identity is tied up with the work they do. I mean, how many people refer themselves as, I'm Bo Henderson, I'm a financial advisor. That's what you know. What else? A lot of people, I think it's just that, who am I? That a lot of those conversations, and when we lose those, we get to retirement. And if we don't start having some conversations and thinking about who am I in retirement, it can be a rough transition. You see spikes in a lot of bad things: alcoholism, divorce, suicide, even. And not to go so dark, Leslie, on you, but one thing is, a lot of times what I found is start running a business, even if it's a part-time business, in some cases, can fill a lot of those needs. You can be out in the community. You can be involved. You can be contributing. You can have a purpose you believe in. You can be around people and investing in relationships. And so I saw in the initial conversations with you were around this idea that, hey, maybe that retirement business fits the need for a lot of people to make this transition in what we define as a successful retirement, which is one that you actually enjoy and is meaningful to you.
Also, what I would add to your list is sometimes a sense of structure. People were used to having a cadence to their day, a cadence to their week, a certain routine, and being accountable to something, being accountable to other people, which in this case would be your customers, or it might be your staff or your vendors. Being responsible for something also is a source of meaning and purpose.
There's a lot to be said about routine, and when that goes away. I had, in the example of the retirement coaching work, I don't know if I've shared this example with you. I may have, but I had a teacher that after 40 years, we worked together for a full year. There was no financial work. Her pension took care of her financial needs. But we spent a whole year trying to work on experimental ideas of what the first semester of retirement would look like, just to ease some anxiety, because this individual knew that when my routine's gone, it's going to be scary for me, right? So it happens. And what I love about when we have the conversation about franchise, the example I use, I started a business from scratch. And what I can say is, if you're fortunate and things line up and the business makes it, it could take 3-5+ years to really get your footing and get going. The nice thing about a franchise, there's so much of the things you're not having to figure out by trial and error. There's a path, there's a process, there's systems. So Leslie, I think you put this to me the way it stuck with me, is it's like being a business owner with some guardrails.
Right, and a playbook.
Right.
So these are in your first 30 days of your business. These are the things that you need to accomplish, the licenses that you need to obtain, the lease that you need to start working on. In your first 90 days of the business, this is where you need to be. It can provide a system of benchmarking and guidance so that you know where the best place is to put your time and how to prioritize your activities. So I think what would be good to understand is that franchise ownership is not less work than starting your own business from scratch, but it provides a framework to approach it in a more streamlined, efficient, strategic way, so that the plates are spinning in the right order.
You're doing the right things. I'm just thinking that, I didn't spend 3 years and I'm going to wake up one day and realize I wasn't doing the right things, because somebody's already figured out how to make this business work.
Yeah, and have some of the things already lined up that any business owner needs. There may be access to supplies at a price discount, having the vendors already lined up. So it's like, here's who you call to get what you need to get your business off of the ground, instead of trying to figure that out while figuring out how to get customers, while figuring out how to get employees, which you do as an independent business owner.
Well, as we talk through all these ideas, and I'm hoping I pique some interest, especially the demographic that tunes into this show, of, hey, maybe that's a viable option for me. And if anybody's interest is piqued, I tell you where I'm going to send them. I'm going to send them to Leslie, but you don't have to go there yet. But what I want to ask Leslie, if somebody's curious, they're saying, hey, this might be something I would like to look into or have more conversations about, what would that process look like? Because we talked about a lot of components of right skill set, right fit. Is it something I enjoy? Is that what's important? How would you go about somebody that said, this is something I'm interested in, to maybe go down that process, kind of left to right, so to speak, linear, from maybe owning their franchise?
So you use the key word right there, Bo. The word is process. So,
Okay.
and franchises work because they have a proven process. And the good news is there is a proven process for evaluating if this whole idea of franchising makes sense and fits into your short-term, longer-term, and retirement goals. And it starts very simply. With the folks that I work with, I like to have just an initial casual conversation over the phone or on Zoom now, of course. And I start to ask some key questions about, what has someone interested in owning their own business? What do they see the benefits of that for them? What would they be looking to gain by owning their own business? We talk about their background and what skills they see themselves enjoying putting to work in their own business. Oftentimes, people are involving family. It might be sooner, it might be later, but people are many times involving a spouse or adult children. It might be part of a legacy strategy. So we've got to kind of talk about all of these things. And then when someone is really ready to immerse themselves in the process of figuring out, well, which franchises, which industries, which brands within those industries would present the best fit, I have a tool that I use. It's kind of a strengths finder assessment tool, or a DISC-like assessment tool that asks some key questions in a very intentional way that allows us to build a profile of these. This is what the qualities that the right franchise for you is going to possess. And it's the tool that I use to commence my search process. And if people are kind of in a good spot mentally, family-wise, financially, there's usually several franchises that are very different from each other in different industries that have the underlying components of what we put into words as being important to them.
And so it's a process, and it like a lot of things, this isn't a decision you make in a day, right? You do research, you explore, and you dig in deep, and then you you have the information to make good decisions. And that's Leslie. I've seen and heard of success stories of her taking people through this process, helping match this up. We've shared stories. One last thing I want to bring up, you mentioned legacy, and we shared stories in the past of mutual clients that they get to retirement age-ish, let's say, or that 55 plus, and they find the ability to start this business, but actually do it with their adult children and create legacy and spend some of those remaining working years side by side with their. Now, for some families, that might not be a great thing, but for some, it's really nice.
I have such a wonderful, very recent example of this. On my TV show, Atlanta Franchise Today, I just interviewed a father and daughter team, Bill and Anne Marie. And Bill left the corporate world about 10 years ago, and he and I got hooked up, and I helped him buy a CertaPro Painters franchise, which was no way related to what he had done before as a corporate executive, but he's grown a very successful business. And then his daughter, who was a teacher, she decided she wanted to make a career change, and she came to him and said, "Hey, Dad, I think I'd like to learn your business." And at first he said no, which is the funny part. But then she wore him down, and she, over the last 4 years, has served in every role in the business except for painting. She's been in sales, she's been in crew cultivation, she's been in leadership and project management. And just earlier this year, she took over the business from Dad. And he's working for her now, which is a very exciting and wonderful example of creating this new career opportunity for your child to step into a thriving business. It's really exciting to see it happen.
And there's the business building component, but then there's that the one word, there's time. You get that time together, which is truly priceless. Yeah. So that's powerful. So those of you watching, I encourage you, as I was talking earlier in the show about being creative, thinking outside of the box. Think about this. If it makes sense that maybe a transition step, because more and more what I see from my perspective as an advisor, helping people transition into retirement, it's rarely I stop a career and I'm done. Usually there's some kind of transition steps, and maybe this makes sense. There's a lot of rewarding things we've talked about, a lot of fulfilling things, and it can fulfill a lot of needs. And Leslie will tell you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but business needs experienced, smart people with a vision of what they really would like to do with the rest of their lives. So check her out. I think the easiest way, Leslie, right, is have people plug into Atlanta Franchise Today.
Yes, that is the best place where you can find me, or my LinkedIn profile. Leslie Kuban. I'm the only one out there that I know of, Kuban with a K. But my show, what's great about just plugging into some of those episodes is I'm interviewing a lot of franchise owners, sharing their successes and their challenges. I'm interviewing franchise brands. So it's a great way to learn beyond just me from a lot of people who've done very well for themselves in franchising.
Well, guys, check out Leslie's show and let's keep an open mind. And maybe for some of you, I know for some of you, franchising might just be the tool. And Leslie is a go-to resource for my community to take you to that next step, or at least have the conversation about what the next step might be. So Leslie, again, thanks so much for sharing. And I'm excited as we continue this work. I do see accomplishing a lot of retirement needs and goals through business ownership. And I know as you continue to grow and build what you're building, I have a feeling we're going to continue to merge and cross paths on this conversation.
No doubt. Looking forward to it.
Thanks so much
for having me today.
I loved it. I took lots of notes. Leslie, will you hang with us for our next segment real quick?
Love to.
Now is the time for Ask Bo, where he answers your questions. Remember to send your questions to askbo.com.
This is the fun part because Leslie actually has a question for Bo today.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, so when people are coming to you in their retirement planning process, kind of visualizing, what does that next chapter of life look like? And if they're asking you about business ownership,
a lot. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering if they're asking you about business ownership, or do you kind of have to plant that seed in their mind as a possibility?
I think the problem, and it's both sides. I think traditional, what is lumped in a box of retirement planning is really focused on an industry of mutual funds, stocks and bonds, and insurance products. So I think a lot of times people come to do retirement planning and it's a question about where do I put my 401k, and they're used to a little different conversation. And where I usually have the business ownership conversation come up is when we start getting really specific about what needs to happen to transition. What are the income gaps we'd need to fill? What is it you really want to do? And we start having some of those non-financial conversations about what do you want retirement to look like? And when I start hearing some of those cues of, I really am going to miss my role as a manager or the leadership position that I had at my employer. That's going to be one of the things I miss the most. That's a great question. What are you going to miss the most when you retire? And sometimes some of those cues will lead me to say, maybe I can tell pretty quick when somebody's not going to be good at just retiring, right? They're not just going to stop. I know that they're going to do something. But a lot of times cues will come up and it'll bring up a conversation around, hey, have you ever thought about owning a business? And a lot of times it'd be fascinating. It's fascinating to say, you know what? I always want to do this, or this, but I always was stuck in my job, never had the opportunity, busy raising a family. So I did think about it at some point or another. So a lot of times I see as we continue to have a deeper conversation about where you are and what you want the next step to look like, that business ownership just comes up sometimes as a potential fit more than anything. Now, there are certain investors that they're looking for businesses. But that's not the typical scenario I see. Is that because people are used to people putting them in a product or unfortunately selling them something, as opposed to what I love about business, we're building something, right? So I don't know.
Proud of. That's cool.
Yeah. So that's why I'm excited about continuing this conversation. And then, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but one thing I like about our conversation specifically to franchising, if I'm 60 years old, I might not want to spend that time by trial and error figuring it out.
Right. And taking the risk at the same time.
Right. Minimize de-risk the situation. And I know there's data and resources to say, well, hey, if these things line up, this is where I should probably be in this range around this time period. You can really do some planning around that.
Yeah. Really good stuff today. This is fun. Leslie, we are so grateful you were with us. I took notes. I know a lot of people are going to gain so much from this, and it's going to open up their minds to go, wow, there are so many more possibilities than I even realized were there. This was incredible. It's why we do this show. Thank you so much for being a part of it today.
Thank you so much. Great to see you both.
Good to see you too. Soon. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Well, Bo, we are ready for a fun part that we have. The last segment of our show today. I'm going to tee it off for you. You've got a story for us today, don't you?
Best and worst. I love when you guys watch the show, share stories during this segment, best and worst. And what I want to hear, some of these I'm just coming across in my day-to-day interaction with retirees and retirement planning clients at Rich Life Advisors. But I love when you share your stories. And best and worst, what I like about this is I'm looking for the things that go right. The great trips that was your favorite trip you've ever taken, the things that maybe were the good surprises, right? The best parts of retirement, because it might be something other people want to know about, or maybe experience or explore. But then the other side, which I think is just as valuable, is the worst. Right? What is something that didn't go right? Maybe some of the horror stories we hear about, because it's in those we all learn. And I can tell you this. Over 23 years of working around retirement, the same question or same thing that happens to somebody, I know 1,000 people that something similar, a similar variation of that kind of thing has happened to. So we all learn together, we grow together, and we collectively raise our retirement IQ, which is really one of the core fundamentals of what we're about here at the Retirement Resource. So I have a worst, Amy. And I want you to imagine this. Imagine this, and I want your reaction. And for those of you watching, so I dealt with a scenario with a family. Husband passed away recently, and going through and helping the surviving spouse go through the process of transitioning the estate and doing her planning, we found that an IRA, and in this IRA, this is going to sting a little bit. This IRA had around $400,000 in it. So it was a substantial IRA. We found out that a marriage 25 years earlier, that spouse was still the beneficiary on that IRA. It was never changed. It was just assumed. They just assumed it had happened at some point along the time. So there's nothing that is a contractual document with a company, and an ex-spouse is getting a $400 and something thousand inheritance, and not the spouse that's been married for the last 22 years.
Right.
And that's not what was intended to happen, but that's one of those horror stories you hear about, right? And you can imagine, I'm here to say the ex-spouse didn't just call up and say, you know what, I want to do the right thing. Let me give you this $400,000.
You need to do the right thing.
It didn't happen that way. So the lesson there, okay, that's a hard one. That's a hard pill to swallow. But the lesson for the rest of us that hopefully that hasn't happened to yet is on all of your retirement accounts, the beneficiary designations are contractual guarantees between you and the custodian, whether that's TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, Vanguard, whoever the custodian is. And it takes precedence or priority over your will. Just because your will says this is what I want, if that's the beneficiary designation on those contracts, that's what's going to happen. Yeah. This family. Yeah. So what my message here is, what we can learn from the worst is make sure, as you're doing annual retirement review meetings, one question that even if things don't seem to change often, every year this needs to be brought up at your annual retirement review. Are there any updates? Let's double check. And are there any updates that need to happen to your beneficiary designations?
Wow.
Because things happen. Something happens to some spouses. People get remarried. Sometimes kids aren't around anymore. So that's one of the worst. But again, if we're going to have to deal with the worst, we try to keep it optimistic here, but it's real life.
It's preventative. This is preventative.
And it's a lesson learned. So everybody to do.
Wow.
One, have annual retirement reviews where you're updating your strategy, making sure it's healthy, making sure it's going to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Two, make sure that every year, if the advisor you're working with, or if you're doing things yourself, make sure on that checklist that the question comes up is there anything that needs to be changed? And are my beneficiary designations current? Because it could save you or your loved ones pretty bad consequences, and to the tune of a recent case of several $100,000.
Yep. Wow. Well, thank you for that one.
Yes. Now, do you have a joke or something? I feel like we need to lighten it up now.
All of that. What I can say is that this was really an excellent show, and we are so grateful that Leslie joined us today. She's a powerhouse, and I am so blessed to be able to be on this side of it, at least a part of this show, and getting great information week after week that our viewers are also getting. It works. It's great for us all. So thank you, Bo.
And for those of you watching, let us know, what is it you want to hear about? Who are the guests you want to have on the show? There's nothing off limits. As long as it's about you living an exciting, fulfilling, meaningful, financially successful. We're not leaving that off the table. That's an important component of it. What is it that you want to learn about? We talked last week about the how much work and the issue we have with navigating taxes moving forward. And this week we shifted to business ownership and retirement and franchising. I would love to find more of a mix of non-financial and financial. So what are some ideas? I would love to have, maybe we should find, I like the idea of, with this theme of a healthy retirement, because physical health is actually the number one determinant of a successful retirement. Maybe we find somebody that specializes in healthy retirements, as far as physical, how do we maintain our physical health? Different things like that. Another one I'm interested in is dating in retirement, right? What do we need to know there?
Not you personally.
Not me personally. Another one, just had a great conversation with a client that made me realize we need to do a show about living abroad in retirement. Really fascinating topic and some really key points. So all that to say is, let Amy know, what are your ideas? What do you want to do? This is your journey. We're just simply along for the ride. So let us know what you'd like to hear more of on the Retirement Resource, and we are here for you. And we'll see you next week, same time, same place, right here on the Retirement Resource.